Our pizza delivery guy accidentally exposed a massive secret, and what happened next was pure chaos. I want you to understand something before I tell you this story. I'm not a detective. I'm not some vigilante with a hero complex. I'm a 31-year-old guy who manages a mid-size accounting firm in suburban Illinois, and until 6 months ago, the most dramatic thing in my life was arguing with my homeowners association about the height of my hedges. But on a Thursday night in October, a 19-year-old kid named Alonzo showed up at my front door with 2 large pepperonis and an order of garlic knots, and within 45 seconds, he accidentally detonated a bomb that blew my entire life wide open. Not a real bomb. Worse. The truth. He rang the doorbell at exactly 8:12 p.m. I know because I checked the timestamp on my Ring camera about 400 times afterward. I opened the door, and Alonzo was standing there with the pizza boxes, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, into my living room, and his face had gone completely white. He said, "Oh man." And then he said 5 words that I will hear in my head for the rest of my natural life. "Yo, that's my boss's wife." Let me back up. My name is Nolan, and I'd been married to my wife, Genevieve, for 4 years. We'd been together for 7 total, met at a friend's wedding in Champaign, where she spilled Merlot on my rental suit, and then spent 20 minutes dabbing at my chest with a napkin while apologizing so profusely that I fell in love with her somewhere between the 3rd and 4th sorry. She was magnetic. Sharp jaw, dark curly hair, the kind of laugh that made strangers in restaurants turn around and smile. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, which meant she traveled a lot. 3 or 4 days a week, she'd be in St. Louis, Indianapolis, sometimes as far as Nashville, meeting with hospital networks and pitching new medications. I never questioned it. Why would I? She had business cards, a company laptop, expense reports, a regional manager named Douglas Everett, who once called our house phone on a Sunday to discuss quarterly projections. I'd heard his voice. I'd seen Genevieve's paychecks deposited into our joint account every 2 weeks, $4,200 after taxes, like clockwork. The job was real. Or at least I believed every piece of it was real, which I now understand are 2 very different things. We had a good life, or what I thought was a good life. We'd bought the house on Wicker Lane 3 years ago, a 4-bedroom colonial with a finished basement, and a backyard big enough for the golden retriever, Biscuit, that Genevieve had surprised me with on my 30th birthday. We hosted dinner parties. We went to farmers markets on Saturday mornings. We talked about having kids. I was happy. Genuinely, deeply, boringly happy, in the way that makes you think you've figured life out. But here's the thing about happiness built on a lie. It doesn't crack slowly. It detonates. And Alonzo, God bless his panicking teenage soul, was the detonator. When he said, "That's my boss's wife," I didn't understand. I turned around to look at my own living room, half expecting to see someone standing behind me, because the statement made no sense. Genevieve wasn't home. She was in Indianapolis for a 3-day conference, or at least that's what she'd told me when she kissed me goodbye on Wednesday morning. My living room was empty. Just the couch, the TV playing a Cubs rerun, and Biscuit asleep on his bed in the corner. I turned back to Alonzo and said, "What are you talking about?" He was already backpedaling, literally stepping backward off my porch. "Nothing, man. My bad. Wrong person. Forget I said anything." But his face was telling a completely different story than his mouth. His eyes were wide, and he was gripping the pizza boxes so hard the cardboard was buckling. "Hold on," I said. "Whose wife?" Alonzo shook his head fast, like a kid caught stealing. "Nobody. She looked like someone from a picture. It's nothing. Here's your pizza, man. Have a good night." He shoved the boxes at me, almost dropped the garlic knots, and practically jogged back to his car, a beat-up Corolla with a glowing delivery sign on the roof. I stood on my porch holding 2 pizzas I'd ordered for myself because my wife was supposedly 200 miles away, and I felt something cold settle into my stomach. Not suspicion exactly. More like a crack forming in glass, the kind you can hear but can't see yet. I ate 1 slice of pizza. I tried to watch the game. I lasted 11 minutes before I picked up my phone and called Genevieve. She answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear background noise, the clinking of glasses, muffled conversation. "Hey, babe," she said, cheerful and slightly breathless. "How's your night?" I asked where she was. "At the hotel bar with some of the reps, Diane and Phil from the Cincinnati office. We're going over tomorrow's presentation." "Why? What's up?" I told her nothing was up. I said I just missed her. She said she missed me too, that she'd be home Friday evening, and that she loved me. I said I loved her back. Then I hung up and sat in my kitchen for 30 minutes staring at the wall, trying to convince myself that a random pizza delivery kid had simply mistaken a photograph on my wall for someone he knew. People look alike. It happens. It meant nothing. I almost believed it. Almost. But at 11:40 that night, I did something I'd never done before in 7 years together. I opened Genevieve's laptop. She had a desktop computer in our shared office upstairs that she mostly used for personal stuff, and I knew her password because she'd given it to me years ago to pay a bill while she was driving. Biscuit 2019, the year we almost adopted him before she surprised me with him anyway. The laptop opened, and I told myself I'd look for 5 minutes, feel stupid, close it, and never speak of this again. I didn't feel stupid. What I found in those first 5 minutes made my hands go numb. Her email was open, and the most recent message was from someone named Reed Calloway. The subject line was simply, "Tonight," with a heart emoji. I clicked it, and I swear my vision tunneled, like the rest of the room just dissolved. The email read, "Left the key under the blue pot, wore the thing you like, don't be late, miss you already." It was sent at 6:15 p.m. that evening, 3 hours ago, while Genevieve was supposedly in Indianapolis, at a conference, with Diane and Phil from Cincinnati. My mouth went dry. I scrolled down and found the thread went back months, hundreds of emails between Genevieve and Reed Calloway, filled with plans, pet names, inside jokes, and details so intimate that reading them felt like being punched repeatedly in a place I didn't know existed. They talked about restaurants they'd been to, trips they'd taken, a weekend in Lake Geneva that happened during what Genevieve told me was a corporate training retreat in April. There were photos attached to some of the emails. I opened one and saw my wife sitting on a man's lap at what looked like a rooftop bar, her head thrown back laughing, his arms around her waist. He was tan, broad-shouldered, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of aggressive confidence you could see even in a still image. I closed the laptop. I opened it again. I closed it. I opened it one more time and screenshot everything. 43 screenshots in 20 minutes, my hands shaking so badly that I kept missing the keyboard shortcuts. Then I went to the bathroom and threw up the single slice of pizza I'd eaten, and I sat on the tile floor with Biscuit nudging my arm, and I tried to understand how the last 7 years of my life had just caught fire. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every business trip, every conference, every late night at the office. The pattern was so obvious in hindsight that I felt physically ill with my own blindness. She never let me drop her off at the airport. She always drove herself and parked in the long-term lot, or so she said. She never FaceTimed from her hotel room, always the lobby or a restaurant or her car. When she came home from trips, she'd shower immediately, which she explained as washing off airplane germs, and I'd believed her because why wouldn't I believe the woman I'd built my life with? Every red flag I'd ever subconsciously noticed came flooding back at once, and each one hit like a physical blow. The time she came home with a sunburn from a St. Louis conference in November. The new perfume she started wearing that she said was a sample from a client, but that I'd never seen a bottle of anywhere in our house. The way she'd angle her phone screen away from me when texting, just slightly, just enough that I couldn't read it, but not enough to seem suspicious. I'd noticed all of it. I'd explained all of it away. Because I trusted her. Because trust was easier than the alternative. And because the alternative was this: lying alone in the dark, realizing the person sleeping next to you for 7 years had been performing a role. The next morning, Friday, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. I sat at the kitchen table with coffee I didn't drink and tried to think strategically instead of emotionally. I needed to know who Reed Calloway was. I needed to know the full scope of what was happening. And I needed to do it before Genevieve came home that evening and I had to look at her face and pretend everything was fine. I started with Google. Reed Calloway wasn't hard to find. He owned a chain of pizza restaurants across the western suburbs called Calloway's Original Pie. 11 locations, established in 2009, known for their Chicago-style deep dish and their bright red delivery cars. I stared at the screen. Pizza. The pizza delivery guy. Alonzo worked for Reed Calloway. That's how he recognized Genevieve. She wasn't just some random woman in a photograph. She was a regular presence in Reed Calloway's life, familiar enough that a teenage delivery driver knew her face on sight from a picture hanging on my living room wall. My wedding photo. Alonzo had recognized my wife from my own wedding photo while delivering pizzas that came from her lover's restaurant. The coincidence was so cruel it almost felt designed. I'd ordered from Calloway's Original Pie dozens of times. It was our go-to pizza place. Genevieve had recommended it. She'd said she'd heard it was great from a coworker. I now understood which coworker. I spent the rest of Friday morning going deeper. Reed Calloway had a public Facebook profile, and I scrolled through it with the detached focus of someone defusing a bomb. He was 44, divorced, had 2 teenage kids from his first marriage. He posted a lot about his restaurants, local charity events, and his boat, a 32-foot cabin cruiser docked at Burnham Harbor that he'd named Second Chance. His posts were full of comments from friends and business associates calling him a great guy, a pillar of the community, a real one. He coached youth baseball. He sponsored a local 5K for cancer research every spring. He had a photo with the mayor at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for his newest location. Reed Calloway was, by every visible measure, a well-liked, successful, charitable man who also happened to be sleeping with my wife. I saved everything, every photo, every post, every comment. I created a folder on my phone called Insurance and started filling it. Then I did something that surprised even me. I drove to the Calloway's Original Pie location closest to my house, the one on Archer Avenue, and I sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes, watching the staff come and go through the front door. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Proof, maybe. Confirmation that this was real, and not some elaborate hallucination brought on by bad pepperoni. At 1:15 p.m., a red BMW pulled into the lot, and Reed Calloway himself stepped out. He was taller than I expected, maybe 6'2", with gray at his temples and the kind of easy swagger that comes from owning things. He walked into the restaurant like he owned the world, which in his small corner of suburban Illinois, he basically did. I watched him through the window, talking to staff, checking his phone, laughing at something a waitress said. And I felt something shift inside me. The shock was calcifying into something harder. Not rage, exactly. Purpose. Genevieve came home at 6:30 that evening. She walked through the front door with her rolling suitcase and her laptop bag and a bright smile and said, "I brought you those chocolate-covered pretzels from that place you like at the Indianapolis airport." She kissed me on the cheek. She smelled like a different perfume than the one she'd left wearing. I took the pretzels and said thank you and asked how the conference was. She talked for 20 minutes about panel discussions and networking dinners and a keynote speaker who'd been surprisingly funny, and I listened to every word knowing that none of it was true. Every sentence was a small, perfect lie delivered with the confidence of someone who'd been practicing for years. I studied her face while she talked, looking for cracks, for guilt, for anything that would betray what I now knew. There was nothing. She was flawless. And that, more than anything, terrified me. That night she curled up next to me in bed and fell asleep within minutes, and I lay there rigid, staring at the dark ceiling, feeling her breathing against my shoulder, and I understood for the first time that I was sharing my life with a stranger. Someone who could lie to my face with that level of skill wasn't just having an affair, they were living a double life. And I needed to understand the full architecture of that life before I made any moves. Over the next 2 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I was methodical, patient, and completely hollow inside. I checked Genevieve's email every night after she fell asleep. I logged into her cloud storage and found a second phone number registered to a prepaid device, which she used exclusively to communicate with Reed. I found hotel reservations in her name at places she'd never mentioned. I found receipts for gifts she'd never given me, a $900 watch, a leather weekend bag, a pair of custom golf shoes. She was spending our money on him. Our joint account, the one I deposited my salary into every 2 weeks, was funding her affair. I calculated the total over 6 months, and the number made me dizzy. $14,000, dinners, hotels, gifts, gas for drives to his house in Naperville. She'd been siphoning money from our shared life to build a separate one, and I'd never noticed because I trusted her with our finances the same way I trusted her with everything else. Completely. I documented it all. Every receipt, every transaction, every email. I created a timeline on a spreadsheet, cross-referencing her supposed business trips with Reed's social media check-ins and the hotel reservations. The overlap was perfect. Every single trip she'd told me was work was actually Reed. Every conference was a getaway. Every late night was his house or his boat. The pharmaceutical sales job was real, at least partially. She did work for Meridian Health Solutions, and she did have clients. But her travel schedule was inflated by at least 50%, padded with fake trips that gave her cover to disappear into her other life. I needed help. Not emotional help, though I probably needed that too. I needed legal help. I called a divorce attorney named Priya Desmond, who'd been recommended by a colleague who'd gone through his own divorce the previous year. Priya had 18 years of family law experience and a reputation for being surgically precise in high-asset cases. I sat in her office on a Monday afternoon and laid everything out, the emails, the screenshots, the financial records, the timeline. She listened without interrupting for 40 minutes, then looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "You've done remarkable work here. Most clients come to me with a suspicion and a gut feeling. You've come with a prosecutable case." She explained that Illinois was a no-fault divorce state, meaning the affair itself wouldn't technically affect the divorce proceedings in terms of grounds. But the financial component was different. The $14,000 Genevieve had spent on Reed from our joint account could be classified as dissipation of marital assets, which meant the court could factor it into the property division. Essentially, Priya said, she spent your money on her affair, and you can get that money back and then some. She also told me something I hadn't considered. Before you do anything, I want you to consult a forensic accountant. If she's been hiding money in amounts you've already found, there may be more you haven't. She recommended a forensic accountant named Arthur Kwan, who spent 3 days going through our financial records and found an additional $8,600 in hidden expenditures routed through a secondary credit card I didn't know existed, a card registered to Genevieve's maiden name and billed to her mother's address. The total was now $22,600 in marital funds spent on the affair. Arthur's report was 31 pages long and documented every dollar with receipts and bank statements. It was devastating and thorough, and I kept it in a locked drawer in my office alongside the rest of my evidence. But the financial betrayal wasn't the worst part. The worst part came on a Wednesday night, 3 weeks after the pizza delivery revelation, when I found the messages about me. I'd been checking Genevieve's second phone number through her cloud backup, and I found a text thread with Reed where they discussed me directly. Reed had asked, "Does he suspect anything?" And Genevieve had replied, "Nolan doesn't suspect his own shadow. He's the most oblivious person I've ever met. I could tell him I was going to Mars and he'd pack my suitcase." Reed sent a laughing emoji. Then Genevieve followed up with, "Honestly, being married to him is like having a roommate who pays for everything. He's useful. That's about it." Useful. 7 years of love, of building a life, of planning a future, reduced to one word. Useful. I read that message sitting in my car in the garage at 11:30 at night, and I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, and I didn't cry. I wanted to, but something in me had gone past crying. I'd entered a place beyond sadness, a cold, clear space where everything was sharp and nothing hurt, because I wouldn't let it. That message became my fuel. Every time I wavered, every time I thought about confronting her early or breaking down or just walking away quietly, I'd remember that word, useful, and I'd keep going. Week 4. I did something that changed everything. I went back to Callaway's Original Pie, not to sit in the parking lot this time. I walked in, sat at a booth, and ordered a deep dish. I wanted to see the operation up close, understand Reed's world the way he'd apparently understood mine. The restaurant was busy, a Thursday lunch rush, and I watched the staff move with practiced efficiency. That's when I saw Alonzo. He was behind the counter, boxing up a delivery order, and the second he noticed me, his face did that thing again, that oh no expression that I'd seen on my porch a month ago. He looked away fast, then looked back, then pretended to be very interested in folding a pizza box. I waited until he walked past my booth toward the kitchen, and I said quietly, "Alonzo, I need to talk to you." He froze like I'd hit him with a stun gun. Then he sat down across from me, looking like he was about to face a firing squad. "I'm so sorry, man," he whispered. "I didn't mean to cause problems. I just recognized her from the photos in Reed's office, and it came out before I could stop myself. I told him it wasn't his fault. I told him he might have saved my life by saying what he said, and then I asked him what he knew." Alonzo talked for 20 minutes, nervously, glancing toward the kitchen every few seconds to make sure Reed wasn't there. Reed had a private office in the back of the Archer Avenue location, and according to Alonzo, Genevieve was there regularly. She'd come in through the back entrance, sometimes during lunch, sometimes in the evening. The staff all knew about her. They called her Mrs. C because Reed had introduced her as his girlfriend using his last name. They'd been together at least 2 years, Alonzo said. Maybe longer. 2 years? I repeated. Alonzo nodded. At least. She was already around when I started, and I've been here since junior year. I did the math. 2 years minimum meant the affair had started less than 2 years into our marriage. She'd barely finished being a newlywed before she'd started building her exit. Alonzo told me something else, something that shifted the entire situation. Reed wasn't just Genevieve's affair partner. He was planning to leave his own situation for her. He talks about it all the time, Alonzo said. How he's going to sell a few locations, buy a bigger house, and move her in. He says they're going to get married once she handles her situation. Her situation. That was me. I was the situation that needed handling. I thanked Alonzo and asked him not to tell Reed we'd spoken. He promised, looking relieved that I wasn't angry at him. "You seem like a good dude," he said as he stood up. "You don't deserve this." I sat in that booth after he left and finished my pizza, which was admittedly excellent, and I thought about what it meant that my wife and her lover had a timeline. They had a plan. She wasn't going to leave me in a dramatic confrontation. She was going to drain me financially, position herself for a favorable divorce, and walk into a ready-made life with a successful restaurant owner. I was being managed, handled, used up like a battery and discarded when empty. The clarity was almost liberating. Almost. I went back to Priya's office and told her everything Alonzo had said. She took notes, asked pointed questions, and then leaned back in her chair. "This changes the strategy," she said. "If they're planning to consolidate assets and she's actively preparing to leave, we need to move faster than them. I want to file before she does. I want her blindsided the way you were." I agreed. But I wanted more than a favorable divorce settlement. I wanted Genevieve to understand what she'd done, not through yelling or confrontation, but through consequence. Real, tangible, unavoidable consequence. Priya nodded slowly. "Then we need to be surgical. Everything by the book. No outbursts, no dramatic revelations. We file, we present the evidence of dissipation, and we let the numbers speak." She filed the preliminary paperwork the next day. I had 14 days before Genevieve would be served. 2 weeks to keep pretending. 2 weeks of eating dinner with her, watching TV with her, lying next to her at night, knowing everything and saying nothing. It was the hardest performance of my life, and I am not a good actor. Every night, I'd look at her across the dinner table and see 2 people, the woman I'd married and the stranger who'd replaced her. They wore the same face, used the same gestures, laughed at the same jokes. But behind it all was that word. Useful. During those 2 weeks, I made one more discovery that nearly derailed everything. I'd been checking Genevieve's cloud backup daily, and on a Sunday morning, I found a new thread with someone saved in her contacts as Diane, work. Except the conversation wasn't about work, it was about me, specifically, about my mental health. Genevieve had written, "I've been telling Nolan's mom that I'm worried about his stress levels, planting seeds that he might be having some kind of breakdown. If things get ugly in the divorce, I want people already questioning his stability." The response from Diane said, "Smart. Document everything weird he does. Even normal stuff can look crazy if you frame it right." I read that thread 4 times. She wasn't just cheating. She wasn't just stealing. She was preemptively destroying my credibility. She was laying groundwork to paint me as unstable so that if I ever told the truth, people would already doubt me. It was strategic, calculated, sociopathic. I screenshot the entire thread and sent it to Priya with the subject line, "You need to see this immediately." Priya called me within an hour. Her voice was different, harder. "This changes things significantly," she said. "This is evidence of a coordinated effort to undermine your character in anticipation of divorce proceedings. It shows premeditation, and a judge will take a very dim view of it. Keep collecting. Don't change a single thing about your behavior. Let her build her fake case. We'll burn it down with her own words." The day Genevieve was served was a Thursday, at 2:15 in the afternoon, at a Starbucks near her actual office. I know because the process server, a calm professional named Dale Whitfield, who'd been doing the job for 12 years, called me afterward and described the scene. Genevieve had been sitting at a corner table with her laptop, probably preparing another fake itinerary, when Dale walked up, confirmed her identity, and handed her the documents. She stared at the envelope for a long moment, then opened it, and Dale said her face went through about 9 different expressions in 10 seconds. Then she looked up at him and said, "Who sent you?" Dale told her it was all in the paperwork. He said she stood up so fast, she knocked over her coffee, grabbed her phone, and walked out of the Starbucks without her laptop. She called me 43 seconds later. I know because I was watching my phone, waiting. I let it ring 5 times, then answered. "Nolan." Her voice was shaking, but not with sadness, with fury. "What the hell is this?" I said. "It's exactly what it looks like, Genevieve." There was a pause. Then, "We need to talk about this. You don't understand the full picture." I told her she was right. I didn't understand the full picture for 7 years, but I understood it now. Then I told her something that I'd been rehearsing for 2 weeks. I know about Reed. I know about the $22,600. I know about the second phone. I know about the fake trips. And I know about the messages where you called me useful and tried to make people think I was having a breakdown. My attorney has all of it. The silence on the other end of the phone was the most satisfying sound I have ever heard. What followed was chaos, but it was the organized kind. Genevieve came home that evening and tried 3 different tactics in rapid succession. First, she cried and said it was a mistake, that Reed had pursued her and she'd been weak. When that didn't work, she got angry and accused me of spying on her, violating her privacy, being controlling and obsessive. When that didn't work, she got quiet and said, "If you go through with this, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." I told her to go ahead. I told her that whatever story she planned to tell, I had documentation that told a different one. And I told her she had until Sunday to collect her personal belongings and move out, because Priya had already filed for exclusive possession of the marital home based on the dissipation evidence. She left that night and went to Reed's house. I know because Alonzo texted me. He'd become an unlikely ally, a quiet source of information who felt guilty about working for someone capable of what Reed had done. "She showed up about an hour ago," Alonzo wrote. "She was crying. Reed looked panicked. Thought you should know." I thanked him and set my phone down and sat in my empty living room with Biscuit's head on my lap and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not happiness, not satisfaction, just quiet. The lying was over. The divorce proceedings took 4 months. Priya was relentless. She presented Arthur Kwan's forensic accounting report, which documented the $22,600 in dissipated assets with surgical precision. She presented the emails, the text messages, the fake travel itineraries, and the thread where Genevieve had conspired to undermine my mental health credibility. Judge Patricia Volkov, who had 23 years on the family court bench and 0 tolerance for financial deception, reviewed everything with visible displeasure. Genevieve's attorney, a sharp litigator named Franklin Guo, tried to argue that some of the expenses were legitimate business costs and that the text messages were taken out of context. Judge Volkov looked at him over her glasses and said, "Counselor, in what context is the phrase 'he's useful' and that's about it? Not disparaging to a spouse." Guo had no good answer. The ruling was decisive. I kept the house. I kept Biscuit. I received a favorable division of assets that accounted for the dissipated funds, and Genevieve was ordered to pay back the $22,600 from her share of the marital property. Priya told me afterward that it was one of the most one-sided outcomes she'd seen in 18 years of practice. "You were patient," she said. "Patience wins these things." But the story didn't end with the divorce. It ended with Reed Calloway, or more precisely, with what happened to him after the truth went public. During the proceedings, Franklin Guo had subpoenaed Reed as a witness, presumably to humanize the relationship and paint it as genuine love rather than calculated betrayal. This was a mistake. Reed took the stand looking confident, wearing a charcoal suit and an expensive watch, and Priya cross-examined him with the calm precision of a surgeon. She asked about the duration of the relationship. 2.5 years. She asked about the gifts Genevieve had given him. He confirmed the watch, the bag, the golf shoes. She asked if he knew those gifts were purchased with marital funds. He said he didn't, but his hesitation was obvious. Then she asked the question that destroyed him. "Mr. Calloway, are you currently in a romantic relationship with anyone other than the respondent?" Reed's face changed. "That's not relevant," he said. Priya looked at Judge Volkov. "Your Honor, it is directly relevant to the respondent's claim that this relationship was based on genuine mutual commitment." The judge allowed it. Priya produced phone records, obtained legally during discovery, showing that Reed had been simultaneously involved with a third woman named Catherine Young, a real estate agent in Elmhurst, for the past 11 months, while planning his future with Genevieve. While Genevieve was dismantling her marriage for him, Reed was cheating on the woman he was cheating with. Genevieve was sitting in the courtroom when this came out. I watched her face, and for the first time in months, I saw something genuine on it. Shock. Real, unfiltered, devastated shock. She looked at Reed, and he wouldn't look back. And in that moment, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt sad. Not for me. For the entire pathetic mess of it. For the waste. Reed's personal life became local gossip within days. Catherine Young, who apparently had no idea about Genevieve, posted a lengthy statement on social media detailing Reed's deception. Customers started leaving reviews on Callaway's original pie referencing the scandal. One review said, "Great deep dish, questionable moral fiber, 3 stars." Reed sold 4 of his 11 locations within 2 months. Whether that was related to the public fallout or just business decisions, I don't know. But Alonzo told me the atmosphere in the remaining restaurants was toxic. Staff were embarrassed to work there. Reed stopped showing up to the Archer Avenue location entirely. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my back porch writing this. Biscuit is chasing squirrels in the yard. The hedges are still too tall according to the HOA, and I've decided I don't care. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Lorraine Okafor, who has 15 years of experience in trauma recovery, and who told me during our 3rd session that what I went through qualifies as a form of intimate partner abuse. Not physical, but psychological. The systematic lying, the financial exploitation, the preemptive character assassination. She said healing isn't linear, and that some days I'll feel fine, and other days I'll feel like it just happened. She was right about that. Last month, I ran into Alonzo at a gas station. He'd quit Callaway's and was working at a different restaurant, a family-owned Thai place that he said treated him better. He asked how I was doing, and I told him the truth. Better. Not great, but better. He nodded and said, "I still think about that night, standing on your porch with those pizzas. I almost didn't say anything." I told him I was glad he did. He smiled and said, "Yeah, me too." I drove home that night and sat in my driveway for a few minutes, looking at my house. My house. The lights were on because I'd started leaving them on when I went out, something I never used to do. Biscuit was probably asleep on the couch, which I now allowed because life is short and furniture is replaceable. The house was quieter than it used to be, but it was honest now. Every room was exactly what it appeared to be. No secrets behind any door, and I realized something sitting there in the dark. The pizza delivery guy didn't ruin my life. He saved it. He gave me the truth, and the truth, as brutal and ugly and painful as it was, set me free. It just took a while. If you made it this far, hit like. You've earned it.